The Valorian warships filled the sky like a swarm of metal locusts. There were so many of them that they blocked out the stars. High Commander Kethril stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human colony burn below. His scaled face twisted into something like a smile. After 300 years of conquest, his people had finally reached the edge of human space. Soon, they would take Earth itself. "The bombardment is complete," his first officer reported. "No survivors detected on the surface." Kethril nodded slowly. The humans had called this world New Pittsburgh. 3 million of them had lived here, building cities and raising families and dreaming of a future among the stars. Now they were all dead. Their cities were ash. Their dreams were smoke rising into a poisoned sky. "Signal the fleet," Kethril commanded. "Tell them to prepare for the next jump." We moved toward their home world. Far above the dying planet, a small human frigate called the Endurance watched everything happen. Captain Daniel Hayes stood at the viewport with his hands clenched into fists. He was 47 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the human fleet for 25 years. He had never seen anything like this. "How many ships did we lose?" he asked quietly. Lieutenant Maria Santos checked her console. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her hands were shaking as she read the numbers. 213 ships destroyed, sir. Only 7 of us made it out. 213 ships. Thousands of good sailors. Gone in less than 4 hours. The Valorians had cut through the human defense fleet like it was made of paper. Their weapons were too powerful. Their shields were too strong. Nothing the humans had could touch them. "Set course for Earth," Hess said. His voice sounded dead, even to his own ears. "Maximum speed." The Endurance turned away from New Pittsburgh and ran into the darkness. Behind them, the Valorian Armada began its slow march toward the heart of human civilization. Admiral Patricia Coleman received the news in her underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. She was 62 years old, with iron-gray hair and a face that had seen too many wars. She had spent her whole life preparing for a fight like this, but nothing could have prepared her for how badly it was going. "Mars fell 3 days ago," General Mathenberg told her. He was a big man with a permanent frown. "The lunar colonies are evacuating now. We have maybe 6 months before the Valorians reach Earth." "Our remaining fleet strength?" Coleman asked. "About 300 ships. Mostly old frigates and light cruisers. Nothing that can stand up to Valorian weapons." Coleman closed her eyes. 300 ships against 12,000. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Unless she did something drastic, the human race would be extinct within a year. "Contact Director Harrison at the Europa facility," she said finally. "Tell him it is time to wake the Dreadnoughts." Burke's face went pale. "Admiral, those ships are not ready. The crews have not been trained. We do not even know if the new drives will work without exploding." "Then we had better hope they work," Coleman replied. "Because if they do not, there will be no one left to bury our dead." Deep beneath the frozen surface of Jupiter's moon Europa, Director Samuel Harrison read the message 3 times before he believed it. He was a small man with forgettable features and quiet eyes. For 40 years, he had run the most secret project in human history. Now that project was about to be tested in ways he had never imagined. "The Lazarus Protocol," his assistant Dr. Linda Powell said. She was brilliant, perhaps the smartest person Harrison had ever known. She had designed the reactor systems that powered their secret weapons. "They want us to deploy the Dreadnoughts." "Yes," Harrison said simply, "but they are not finished. We need at least another 2 years for proper testing. The Prometheus drives have never been used in combat." "The weapon systems will have to work," Harrison interrupted, "or humanity dies. It is that simple." He walked to the observation window and looked out at the massive hangar bay beyond. 12 ships hung in the darkness there. Each one was 3 miles long, bristling with weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. They were monsters of metal and fire, built in secret over 4 decades. They were humanity's last hope. Begin the awakening sequence, Harrison ordered, and pray that we have done enough. Captain Hayes reached Earth 3 weeks later. His little frigate limped into orbit around the blue planet he had not seen in 5 years. For a moment, he simply stared at it through the viewport. The white clouds, the blue oceans, the green and brown land masses. Home. He was home. Then Admiral Coleman summoned him to her command center, and his moment of peace ended. "You want me to command what?" he asked, staring at the holographic image floating before him. The ship was enormous. 3 miles of armored hull and massive weapons. It dwarfed anything Hayes had ever seen. It dwarfed anything he had ever imagined. "The Resolute," Coleman said. "One of 12 dreadnoughts we have been building in secret for the past 40 years. She needs a captain who has fought the Valorians and survived. That is you." "I survived by running away," Hayes said bitterly. "That does not make me qualified to command a ship like this. It makes you the most qualified person we have left." Coleman stood and walked to the window. Outside, the remnants of the human fleet floated in orbit, battered and broken. "Everyone else is dead, Captain. You are what we have. So you will take that ship, and you will learn how to fight with her. And when the Valorians come, you will make them pay for every world they have burned." Hayes looked at the hologram for a long moment. He thought about New Pittsburgh. He thought about the friends he had lost. He thought about the 3 million colonists who had died while he ran away. "Yes, ma'am," he said finally. "I will do my best. Your best is all I ask," Coleman replied. "Now go. You have a ship to learn and not much time to learn her." Hayes saluted and left the command center. As he walked toward the shuttle that would take him to his new command, he felt something he had not felt since New Pittsburgh fell. It was small and fragile, barely a spark in the darkness of his grief, but it was hope. And sometimes hope was enough. The shuttle carried Captain Daniel Hayes through the darkness of space toward his new command. He sat by the window and watched the Resolute grow larger with each passing minute. At first, it was just a shape against the stars. Then it became a mountain. Then it became something his mind could barely accept. 3 miles of warship. The largest vessel ever built by human hands. And somehow, he was supposed to command it. "First time seeing a dreadnought up close?" the shuttle pilot asked. She was a young woman named Lieutenant Karen Webb, with short red hair and an easy smile. "First time seeing anything like this," Hayes admitted. "I did not even know these ships existed until yesterday. Nobody did." That was the point. Webb guided the shuttle toward a massive hangar bay carved into the dreadnought's side. The Lazarus Protocol. 40 years of secret construction. They built these things piece by piece, smuggled the parts across the solar system, assembled them in hidden facilities. The Valorians never had a clue. Hayes shook his head slowly. 40 years. An entire generation of scientists and engineers and workers, all dedicated to building weapons that might never be used. And now those weapons were humanity's only chance. The shuttle landed softly in the hangar bay. Hayes stepped out and found himself standing in a space larger than most sports stadiums. Dozens of smaller craft were parked in neat rows. Hundreds of crew members moved about their duties. The air hummed with energy and purpose. "Captain Hayes?" A young officer approached him, saluting crisply. "I am Lieutenant Commander Kevin Morris, your tactical officer. Welcome aboard the Resolute." Morris was maybe 30 years old, with sandy brown hair and the kind of eager expression that Hayes associated with officers who had never seen real combat. But there was intelligence in his eyes, and his handshake was firm. "Thank you, Commander," Hayes said. "I understand you have been aboard for a few weeks already." "Yes, sir." "Learning the weapon systems." Morris fell into step beside Hayes as they walked toward the main corridor. "They are unlike anything else in the fleet. The main battery is called a singularity lance. It creates a tiny black hole and fires it at the enemy. Anything it touches just disappears." Hayes stopped walking. "A black hole? As a weapon?" "A very small, very temporary black hole. It collapses after impact." Morris grinned like a child showing off a new toy. "The secondary batteries fire plasma bolts that can cut through Valorian shields like they are not even there. And the defensive systems can absorb almost any attack and convert the energy into additional power for our own weapons." It sounded impossible. It sounded like magic. But Hayes had seen the Valorians destroy 200 ships in 4 hours. If magic was what they needed, then magic was what they would use. "Show me the bridge," he said. The bridge of the Resolute was a cathedral of technology. Curved walls rose 3 stories high, covered with displays and control panels. Dozens of officers sat at their stations, monitoring systems that Hayes could not even begin to understand. At the center of it all was the captain's chair, a simple seat of black leather that somehow managed to look both humble and commanding. "Your crew is still being assembled," Morris explained. "We have about 60% of our full complement. Most of them are transfers from other ships or recent academy graduates. Not much combat experience, I am afraid." "Combat experience can be gained," Hayes said. He walked slowly around the bridge, letting his fingers trail over the smooth surfaces of the control panels. "What matters is whether they are willing to learn and willing to fight." "They are, sir. Every single one of them volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not come back." Hayes nodded slowly. Volunteers. People who knew the odds and chose to face them anyway. That was something. That was the beginning of a real crew. "Lieutenant Santos," he called out suddenly. A familiar face looked up from the communications console. Maria Santos, who had served with him on the Endurance, who had watched New Pittsburgh burn beside him. She smiled, and for the first time in weeks, Hayes felt something warm in his chest. "I requested a transfer when I heard you were taking command," she explained. "Someone has to keep you out of trouble, sir. And I'm glad you did." Hayes looked around at his new bridge crew. Young faces, nervous faces, determined faces. They were not soldiers yet, but they would be. He would make sure of it. Far away, in the depths of the Valorian Armada, High Commander Kethrol reviewed his battle plans with growing impatience. The journey to Earth was taking longer than he had expected. Human resistance, though futile, was slowing his advance. Small ships would emerge from hiding, fire a few shots, then flee before his forces could destroy them. It was annoying rather than dangerous, but it made him want to crush their home world even more. "How long until we reach the human home planet?" he demanded. 6 weeks at current speed, his navigation officer replied. "We could go faster, but the fleet needs time to resupply and repair between engagements." 6 weeks. Kethrol drummed his clawed fingers on the arm of his command chair. 6 weeks until a final battle. 6 weeks until the human race joined the long list of species the Valorians had exterminated. Send a message to their government, he decided. Tell them they have one chance to surrender. If they submit now, we will make their deaths quick and painless. If they resist, we will burn their world slowly, and the last generation of humans will die screaming. His officers exchanged glances but said nothing. They knew better than to question the High Commander when he was in this mood. The message was sent. And on Earth, Admiral Coleman received it with a grim smile. "They want us to surrender," she told her staff. "They promise a quick death if we give up. And if we refuse?" General Burke asked. then they will kill us slowly instead. Coleman crumpled the message and threw it into the recycler. Prepare a response. Tell them that humanity does not surrender. Tell them that if they want Earth, they will have to take it from our cold, dead hands. And tell them that when they arrive, we will have a surprise waiting for them. The Dreadnoughts? The Dreadnoughts. Coleman turned to face the holographic display showing the 12 massive ships now orbiting Earth. They were almost ready. A few more weeks of preparation, a few more days of training, and then the Valorians would learn that humanity was not as helpless as they believed. They think we are prey, she said quietly. They are about to discover that we are predators too. On the Resolute, Captain Hayes received the news of the Valorian ultimatum with cold fury. He gathered his senior officers in the briefing room and showed them the message. They want us to die on our knees, he said. I say we die on our feet instead. Who is with me? Every hand in the room went up. And Hayes knew that whatever happened next, he was exactly where he needed to be. The Valorian Armada arrived at Earth on a cold November morning. 12,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and filled the space between Earth and Mars with death. They came in waves, each wave larger than the last, until the sky itself seemed to darken with their presence. High Commander Kethril stood on his bridge and looked at the blue planet floating in the distance. Such a small world to have caused so much trouble. Such a weak species to have resisted so long. But their resistance ended today. Begin the attack, he ordered. Destroy their fleet and prepare for planetary bombardment. The first Valorian ships surged forward, their weapons already charging. They expected the humans to run. They expected easy kills and quick victory. What they found was something very different. 300 human ships stood between the Valorians and Earth. They were old ships. Battered ships, ships that had survived the retreat from the outer colonies through luck and desperation. They were no match for Valorian technology. Everyone knew this. The humans knew it better than anyone. But they did not run. Captain Luis Torres commanded the destroyer Defiance from the front line. He was 50 years old with a thick gray beard and hands scarred from decades of hard service. He had known Daniel Hayes since they were both young officers on their first assignment. Now he was going to die so his old friend could live. All hands, this is the captain, Torres announced over the ship's intercom. The Valorians are coming. We all know what that means. We cannot win this fight with the weapons we have. But we can buy time. Every minute we hold them back is another minute for the Dreadnoughts to power up. Every Valorian ship we damage is one less ship attacking Earth. He paused, looking at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. So many of them. So few of his own people. I am not going to lie to you, he continued. Most of us will not survive this battle. But our deaths will mean something. Our sacrifice will give humanity a chance. And that is worth dying for. He took a deep breath. All hands to battle stations. May God be with us all. The human fleet met the Valorians in a storm of fire and death. Plasma bolts and missile salvos filled the space between the two armadas. Human ships exploded by the dozens, their shields overwhelmed by superior firepower. But they did not stop fighting. They could not stop fighting. The survival of their species depended on every second they could buy. On the Resolute, Captain Hayes watched the battle from his hidden position behind Jupiter. The Dreadnoughts were still powering up their main systems. The Prometheus drives needed another 12 hours before they could safely engage. 12 hours of watching his fellow sailors die. How many have we lost? He asked quietly. Lieutenant Santos checked her console, her face pale. 87 ships in the first hour alone. The Valorians are cutting through our lines like they are not even there. 87 ships. Thousands of lives. And the battle had only just begun. Can we engage early? Hayes demanded. Can we cut the power-up sequence short? Dr. Linda Powell's voice came through the communication system from engineering. If we try to use the drives before they are ready, there is a 60% chance of catastrophic reactor failure. The ships would explode before we could fire a single shot. And if we wait, then the conventional fleet will be destroyed, and we will face the Valorians alone. It was an impossible choice. Risk destruction to save his people now, or wait and watch them die for a chance at victory later. Hayes closed his eyes and tried to think of another way. But there was no other way. There never had been. We wait, he said finally, and we pray that enough of them survive to see us coming. The battle raged for 6 terrible hours. The human fleet fought with everything they had. They fired until their weapons overheated. They rammed Valorian ships when their missiles ran out. They turned their own reactors into bombs and crashed into enemy formations. Captain Torres watched his tactical display grow darker and darker as friendly ships winked out of existence. The Defiance had taken heavy damage. Half his crew was dead. 3 of his 4 engines were destroyed. But he was still fighting. Captain, his first officer called out. Message from Admiral Coleman. The Dreadnoughts will be ready in 2 more hours. 2 hours. Torres looked at what remained of the human fleet. Maybe 40 ships still operational. Maybe 1,000 sailors still alive. Could they hold for 2 more hours? Reply to the Admiral, Torres said. Tell her we will give her those 2 hours. Whatever it takes. He opened a channel to the Resolute. Daniel Hayes appeared on the screen, his face drawn with worry and grief. Luis, Hayes said. What are you doing? What needs to be done, old friend? Torres smiled, though there was no joy in it. The Defiance is going to buy you some time. When those big ships of yours are ready, you make the Valorians pay for everything they have taken from us. Luis, do not do this. There has to be another way. There is no other way. There never was. Torres leaned closer to the screen. Daniel, I have known you for 30 years. You are the best officer I have ever served with. Now show me that I am right. Take those dreadnoughts and save our people. The screen went dark. Hayes stood frozen for a long moment, his hands gripping the arms of his chair until his knuckles turned white. Captain? Lieutenant Morris asked carefully. Your orders? Hayes took a deep breath. Then another. When he spoke, his voice was steady, though his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Monitor the battle. Track every Valorian ship. When the drives are ready, I want to know exactly where to hit them first. Yes, sir. On the Defiance, Captain Torres gave his final orders. The ship's reactor was set to overload. All remaining weapons were locked on the Valorian flagship. Every surviving crew member was strapped into their stations, ready for what came next. All hands, Torres said one last time. It has been an honor serving with you. The Defiance surged forward, engines screaming as they pushed the damaged ship faster than it was ever meant to go. Valorian weapons fire tore into the hull, killing sailors and destroying systems. But the ship kept coming. Torres saw the Valorian flagship growing larger in his viewport. He saw the defensive fire trying desperately to stop him. He saw his own death approaching and felt no fear. For Earth, he whispered. The Defiance struck the Valorian flagship at full speed, its reactor exploding on impact. The blast consumed both ships and 3 enemy cruisers nearby. When the fire faded, nothing remained but debris and radiation. On the Resolute, Daniel Hayes watched the explosion in silence. Somewhere in that fire, his oldest friend had just died. Somewhere in that destruction, a hero had been born. 2 more hours, he said quietly. We hold for 2 more hours. And then we make them pay. The surviving human ships heard his words and found new strength. They kept fighting. They kept dying. and they kept hoping that their sacrifice would mean something. In 2 hours, they would find out. The 2 hours passed like 2 centuries. Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched the human fleet die. Ship after ship vanished from his tactical display. Name after name was added to the list of the dead. By the time Dr. Powell finally contacted him from engineering, only 31 human ships remained. Prometheus drives are online, Powell reported. All systems are green. The Dreadnoughts are ready, Captain. Hayes closed his eyes for just a moment. Ready. After 40 years of secret construction. After weeks of desperate preparation. After hours of watching his friends sacrifice themselves. The moment had finally arrived. Signal all Dreadnoughts, he commanded. Form up on the Resolute. We move in 5 minutes. Across the solar system, 12 massive ships began to stir. Their engines glowed with light brighter than any star. Their weapons hummed with power that could crack planets. They had been built for this moment. They had been waiting for this day. Course plotted. Lieutenant Commander Morris reported from the tactical station. We will emerge from behind Jupiter's mass shadow in 4 minutes. The Valorians will not see us coming until we are right on top of them. Good. Hayes turned to face his crew. They were young, most of them. Scared, all of them. But they were ready. He could see it in their eyes. Today, we show the Valorians what happens when they push humanity too far. Today, we show them that we are not victims. We are not prey. We are the most dangerous species in this galaxy, and they are about to find out why. A cheer went up from the bridge crew. It was not a loud cheer, not a triumphant one. But it was real, and it was enough. Engage drives, Hayes ordered. Take us in. The 12 Dreadnoughts leaped forward, their Prometheus drives bending space itself around them. They crossed the distance between Jupiter and Earth in seconds, emerging from faster-than-light travel directly behind the Valorian Armada. For a moment, the alien ships did not even notice them. Then the Resolute fired its Singularity lance. High Commander Kethrall was reviewing casualty reports when his flagship shuddered violently. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Officers shouted in confusion and fear. And when Kethrall looked at his tactical display, he saw something that made his blood run cold. "What are those?" he demanded, pointing at the 12 massive contacts that had appeared from nowhere. "Unknown configuration," his sensor officer stammered. "They are 3 miles long. Their power readings are impossible. We have never encountered anything like them. 3 miles long. Impossible power readings." Kethrall stared at the display and felt something he had never experienced in 300 years of conquest. He felt afraid. "Destroy them," he commanded. "All ships, concentrate fire on those contacts." The Valorian Armada turned its attention to the Dreadnoughts. Thousands of weapons fired at once. The space around the human ships filled with plasma bolts and missile swarms and energy beams powerful enough to shatter moons. It was the most concentrated firepower the Valorians had ever unleashed, and it did nothing. The Dreadnought shields absorbed the attacks like a sponge absorbing water. The energy simply vanished, converted into additional power for the human weapons. Not a single bolt reached the armored hulls beneath. "Impossible," Kethrall whispered. Then the Dreadnoughts fired back. The Singularity lances were weapons unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They created points of infinite density and hurled them at relativistic speeds. When they struck a target, that target simply ceased to exist, compressed into nothing by gravitational forces beyond imagination. 12 lances fired. 12 Valorian ships vanished. Not destroyed, not damaged. Vanished as if they had never existed at all. "All ships, retreat," Kethrall ordered, his voice shaking. "Fall back and regroup." But falling back was not so easy. The dreadnoughts were faster than they looked, and their weapons had range that seemed to defy physics. Valorian ships that tried to flee were cut down before they could reach safe distance. Those that tried to fight were annihilated in seconds. On the Resolute, Captain Hayes watched the Valorian Armada begin to crumble. For the first time since the war began, humans were winning. For the first time in months, he felt something other than grief and despair. "Target their command ships," he ordered. "Take out their leadership, and the rest will fall apart." "Targeting now," Morris replied. His hands flew across his console, directing weapons fire with deadly precision. Enemy flagship identified. Firing Singularity Lance. The lance crossed the distance in less than a second. Kethril saw it coming and had just enough time to realize he was about to die. Then his flagship collapsed into a point smaller than an atom, and the High Commander's 300 years of conquest came to an end. The destruction of the flagship sent the Valorian Armada into chaos. Ships collided with each other as they tried to flee. Formations broke apart as commanders issued contradictory orders. The disciplined force that had conquered 1,000 worlds became a panicked mob running for its life, and still the dreadnoughts kept firing. Lieutenant Santos monitored communications from her station, her face bright with something between joy and disbelief. "The Valorians are broadcasting surrender requests. They are asking for mercy." Mercy? Hayes thought about New Pittsburgh. He thought about Captain Torres. He thought about the 2 million humans who had died since this war began. "Do they deserve mercy, Lieutenant?" Santos hesitated. It was a hard question, and there was no easy answer. "Perhaps not, sir. But we are not like them. We do not kill for pleasure or conquest. We kill because we have to." Hayes nodded slowly. She was right. Of course, she was right. Humanity's strength had never been cruelty. It had been the ability to be better than their enemies, even when their enemies deserved none of it. "Signal the Valorian fleet," he said. "Tell them they have one chance to withdraw from human space. If they leave now and never return, we will let them go. If they stay—" He gestured at the tactical display, where Valorian ships were still dying by the dozen. "Well, they can see what happens to those who stay." The message was sent. And for a long, tense moment, the battle paused as the Valorians considered their options. Then, slowly, the surviving ships began to turn away. They gathered into loose formations and limped toward the edge of the solar system. They were beaten. They knew it. And they were running. A cheer erupted across the bridge of the Resolute. Officers hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. After months of defeat and death, humanity had finally won a battle. They had proven that they could fight back. They had shown the Valorians that Earth was not easy prey. Hayes did not join the celebration. He sat in his command chair and watched the enemy flee, his face expressionless. They had won today, but the war was far from over. The Valorians would return with more ships and more determination. Other threats would emerge from the depths of space. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, and humanity was just beginning to understand its place in it. But they had taken the first step. They had proven that they could survive. And that was enough for now. "Set course to link up with the remaining fleet," Hayes ordered quietly. "We have wounded to rescue and dead to honor. The celebration can wait." The Resolute turned toward Earth, its massive form casting a shadow across the stars. Behind it, the wreckage of the Valorian Armada drifted in the void, a monument to human determination and sacrifice. The battle was over, but the story was just beginning. The battle for Earth lasted 4 days in total. When it finally ended, the Valorian Armada had been reduced from 12,000 ships to less than 3,000. The survivors fled into deep space, their formation shattered, their confidence destroyed. They had come to exterminate humanity. Instead, they had learned to fear it. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the observation deck of the Resolute and watched the last Valorian ships disappear into the darkness. 4 days of constant fighting. 4 days of death and fire and desperate struggle. Now it was over, and he was still alive. He was not sure how to feel about that. Captain? Lieutenant Santos appeared beside him, her uniform wrinkled and her eyes tired. Like everyone else on the ship, she had barely slept since the battle began. Admiral Coleman is requesting a report on our status. Tell her the Resolute is operational. 73% crew efficiency. Minor damage to secondary systems, nothing critical. Hayes turned away from the viewport. And tell her we lost 412 people during the battle. Their names will be submitted with the full report. 412. Out of a crew of 8,000, it seemed like a small number. But Hayes knew every one of those names. He had memorized them during the long hours of battle, promising himself he would remember each person who died under his command. Santos nodded and moved away to send the message. Hayes remained at the viewport for a few more minutes, then forced himself to return to the bridge. There was still work to be done. There would always be work to be done. The days that followed the battle were filled with grief and celebration in equal measure. The human fleet had lost over 200 ships and nearly 50,000 sailors. The colonies in the outer system were still burning. The scars of war would take decades to heal, but humanity had survived. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that had conquered 1,000 worlds, they had fought back and won. That meant something. That meant everything. Admiral Patricia Coleman addressed the United Earth Assembly 1 month after the battle. She stood before the representatives of every nation on the planet and told them the truth, holding nothing back. We have won a great victory, she said. But we have also paid a terrible price. 2 million humans died in this war. 2 million sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, friends and lovers. We must never forget their sacrifice. We must never take for granted what they bought with their blood. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. They were tired, all of them. Scared, most of them. But they were listening, and that was what mattered. The Valorians will return, Coleman continued. They will come with more ships, more weapons, more determination to destroy us. We have bought ourselves time, nothing more. And we must use that time wisely. She activated a holographic display showing the 12 dreadnoughts orbiting Earth. They were battered from the battle, but they were already being repaired. Soon they would be ready to fight again. We are building more of these ships, she explained. Larger shipyards, faster construction, better weapons. Within 5 years, we will have a fleet capable of taking the fight to the Valorians themselves. Within 10 years, we will be strong enough that no one in this galaxy will dare threaten us again. A murmur ran through the assembly. Some delegates looked hopeful. Others looked doubtful. But none of them looked defeated. We are not victims, Coleman said, her voice rising. We are not prey. We are humans. And we will survive. Whatever it takes, whatever the cost, we will survive. The assembly rose to its feet, applauding. It was not a celebration of war, but of hope. After months of darkness, humanity could finally see a light at the end of the tunnel. Daniel Hayes visited the memorial wall 3 months after the battle. The wall stretched for miles across the plains outside the old city of Denver. Black granite slabs carved with the names of everyone who had died in the war. 2 million names. 2 million stories. 2 million reasons to keep fighting. He found Luis Torres's name near the middle of the wall. His old friend's name was carved in simple letters, no different from any of the others. Captains and privates, admirals and enlisted crew, all equal in death. We won, Luis, Hayes said quietly. Just like you asked. though I am not sure what wing means anymore. He pressed his palm against the cold stone, feeling the rough edges of the carved letters beneath his fingers. Torres had died so that others could live, so that the Dreadnoughts could have time to power up, so that Hayes could have a chance to save their people. It was a debt that could never be repaid. But Hayes could try. Every day, he could try. Captain Hayes? A young voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find Lieutenant Commander Morris standing a few feet away, looking uncertain about whether he should have disturbed the moment. "What is it, Commander?" "Message from Admiral Coleman, sir. She wants to see you at headquarters. Something about a new mission." Hayes nodded slowly. A new mission. The war was not over. There would always be another battle, another enemy, another crisis that demanded his attention. That was the burden of command. That was the price of victory. "Tell her I am on my way," he said. He took one last look at Torres's name, then turned and walked toward the waiting transport. The memorial wall stretched behind him, a silent reminder of everything humanity had lost. But ahead of him, the sky was blue and clear, full of promise and possibility. Somewhere out there, among the countless stars, humanity's future was waiting to be written. There would be challenges and dangers beyond anything they had yet faced. There would be enemies who made the Valorians look gentle by comparison. There would be sacrifices and suffering and loss. But there would also be triumph. There would be discovery and wonder and joy. There would be new worlds to explore and new friends to find. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, and humanity was finally ready to face them. Captain Daniel Hayes climbed into the transport and felt the engines hum to life beneath him. He was tired, and he was sad, and he was still carrying the weight of everyone who had died under his command. But he was also alive. He was also ready. And he was also, despite everything, hopeful. The transport lifted off and turned toward the stars. Earth grew smaller in the viewport, a blue marble floating in the endless black. Hayes looked at it for a long moment, then turned his attention forward. The story of humanity among the stars was just beginning. And whatever came next, they would face it together. They would face it as humans, and they would survive.